You signed the papers, you handed over $80,000, you shook hands with the agent, took a photo with the keys, and posted it. And somewhere in that moment, you felt like you had finally done something right. 3 years later, you find out that your neighbor bought the same floor plan, same building, for $40,000 less. Not because they were smarter, not because they were richer, because they knew something you did not. Nobody told you. Not the agent, not the bank, not your parents, not the government brochure about first-time buyers. And here's the thing no one will say plainly. The entire system around homeownership is not designed to help you buy well. It is designed to make sure you buy. Those are two completely different things, so what did they tell you instead? They told you that renting is throwing money away, that buying builds equity, that real adults own property. You heard it at dinner tables, you heard it from colleagues posting key photos, you heard it from the bank when they approved you for more than you expected and called it good news. Every single one of those messages had a sponsor. The bank earns hundreds of thousands in interest over 30 years. The agent earns a percentage of the sale price. The higher the price, the more they take. The government collects taxes on every transaction. The builder profits from every square meter you add to your wish list. None of them eat when you rent. All of them eat when you buy. That is not a conspiracy. It is a structural incentive. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable. The people who actually understand money do not do what you were told to do. Jeff Bezos rented an apartment in Seattle for years while Amazon was becoming a billion-dollar company. Elon Musk sold all his homes and announced he was renting. Warren Buffett still lives in the same Omaha house he bought in 1958 for $31,000. Not because he cannot afford better, because he understands something most people refuse to accept. A house is not an investment, it is a place to live. Those are not the same thing. And the confusion between the two is costing you. Here is what is actually happening when you put $80,000 into a down payment. That money stops working. It is not earning. It is not compounding. It is not responding to opportunity. It is sitting inside, walls frozen, while you pay taxes and insurance and maintenance to keep those walls standing. The wealthy call this dead capital, money that has stopped moving. If you had invested that $80,000 in a diversified index fund at average historical returns, in 30 years it is worth somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000 without a single additional contribution. Instead, you converted it into a structural component of a building that will cost you $15,000 to $20,000 per year just to maintain after it is paid off. That is not wealth building. That is wealth parking. Now let us do the calculation they never do for you. You buy a home for $400,000, 20% down, 7% interest rate over 30 years. Over that period, you will pay approximately $447,000 in interest alone. To the bank, you get nothing back for it, not equity, not ownership, nothing. Add property taxes, roughly $144,000 over 30 years in most markets. Add insurance, around $45,000. Add maintenance, between $120,000 and $240,000, assuming nothing major breaks. Your $400,000 home has actually cost you somewhere between $1 million and $1.2 million. And if it is worth $800,000 after 30 years, which sounds incredible, you have spent $1 million to own something worth $800,000. The math is negative before you even start celebrating. You already know the objection. You would have been paying rent anyway. That is true. It is also exactly what the story relies on. The comparison to renting is supposed to make buying look like the rational choice. But here's what that comparison always leaves out: the renter who invests the difference. In most major cities right now, renting the equivalent property costs between $500 and $1,500 less per month than the all-in cost of owning, every month, for 30 years. If you invest that difference at 8% annual returns, that is somewhere between $1 and $1.4 million. Add the invested down payment, you are looking at nearly $2 million versus a house that costs more than it is worth. The renter who actually invested the difference wins by a margin that is not close. The catch, and it is a real one, is that most renters do not invest the difference, they spend it. So buying functions as forced savings for people who would not save otherwise. That is real. It is just not the same as saying buying is a good investment. It is saying buying is a savings mechanism for people who cannot trust themselves with the liquidity. Those are different statements, and only one of them sounds like financial advice. Now let us talk about the three actors in this system, because understanding who is in the room changes everything. The first is the agent. They will call themselves your buyer agent. They will walk through properties with you, answer your questions at 10 at night, and feel like the most helpful person in the transaction. What they will not tell you is that in the vast majority of transactions, they are legally mandated by the seller. Their commission is a percentage of the sale price. Every time you negotiate a lower price, they earn less money. Their financial interest is structurally opposite to yours, not because they are malicious, because that is how the system is built. The second is the bank. They will approve you for more than you need and present it as good news. They will offer you the first mortgage product that fits their margins and call it their best rate. They will not volunteer that a competing institution might be cheaper or that negotiating your rate is something you can actually do. Every $1,000 they add to your loan is money they earn. There is no version of this relationship where their incentive is to minimize what you borrow. The third is the narrative itself. Owning is success. Renting is failure. This story is so embedded in most cultures that it operates like gravity. You do not notice it is pulling you somewhere. You just feel the pull. It was useful advice in 1970. It was true for your parents in a market with low price-to-rent ratios and sustained inflation. It is not automatically true for you and your market in your decade. But nobody updated the story. Here's what the buyers who consistently get better outcomes do differently. They run the price-to-rent ratio before anything else. You take the purchase price of a property and divide it by the annual rent you would pay for an equivalent one. If the number is above 20, renting is almost certainly cheaper on a monthly basis. In most major cities right now, that number is between 25 and 40. They calculate the opportunity cost of the down payment. They ask, what would this money earn invested over my intended holding period? That number becomes the floor their home needs to beat just to break even. They separate the timeline. The break-even point for buying versus renting when you account for all costs is typically between 7 and 10 years. Below that, buying almost never wins the math. If there is any realistic chance they move within 5 years, they do not buy. And they negotiate the mortgage, not the one the bank offers first, the actual best rate available. The bank expects you to accept the first offer. Most people do. These are not advanced tactics. They are just the questions nobody suggests you ask. And I want to be honest about something because this part matters. The desire to own is real. The feeling of having something permanent, something yours, something you can paint and change and settle into, that is a legitimate human need, not a financial error. Wanting stability for your children, not wanting a landlord to raise your rent or sell the building, these are valid reasons to buy. The problem is not that people buy homes. The problem is that people buy homes believing it is the best financial decision they could make when it is actually a lifestyle decision disguised as an investment. Those two things feel identical in the moment. They produce very different outcomes over 30 years. The wealthy figured out how to separate them. They buy when ownership serves their life. They rent when their capital can serve their future better. They never let the story make the decision for them. The neighbor who paid $40,000 less than you, same building, same year, same market, they did not have better luck. They had different information. They ran the numbers before they fell in love with the property. They asked the agent questions that made the agent uncomfortable. They negotiated the mortgage like the bank expected them not to. They did not win because they were smarter. They won because they refused to let the system run the transaction for them. That is available to you. Not after the papers are signed, right now, before the next decision, before the next conversation with an agent who is technically not working for you. If this video showed you something your agent never mentioned, that is exactly why it exists. The next video is about the mortgage conversation most buyers never have. The one where you find out the first offer was not the real offer. Subscribe if you want the rules of the game, not the brochure. But here's the part nobody tells you until it is already done. You will not notice the system running on you while it is happening, because the system does not look like a system. It looks like helpful people, a smooth process, and good news arriving at the right moment. The pre-approval that came faster than expected. That is not luck. That is a bank that has already calculated how much interest you will generate. The agent who answered every question before you finished asking it, That is not exceptional service. That is someone who knows that an informed buyer negotiates and an excited buyer does not. The urgency. Someone else is interested. The seller has other offers. You need to decide by tomorrow. That pressure is manufactured more often than it is real, and it works every time on buyers who did not already know it was coming. The operator in a workplace uses the same mechanics. Friendly surface, invisible structure. You feel like you are making the decision. You are not. Here's something concrete. In markets where the price-to-rent ratio exceeds 25, which describes most major cities right now, a buyer at median income who puts 20% down and buys at the median home price will spend more on housing costs in the first 10 years than a renter in the same property who invests the difference. Not a little more, significantly more. The break-even where buying finally starts to win is somewhere between year 8 and year 12, depending on the market. The average American moves every 7 years. That timing is not a coincidence. That timing means the average buyer exits the transaction before they ever reach the mathematical break-even. They sell, absorb the transaction costs, and start the calculation over again in the next market. The agent earns a commission every time. So here's what you actually need before the next conversation with an agent or a bank. 3 questions. That's all. The first, what is the price-to-rent ratio in this specific market right now? Not a general number. This market, this building, this year. If the agent cannot tell you or avoids the question, calculate it yourself. Purchase price divided by annual equivalent rent. Above 20 means renting is probably cheaper today. The second, what is the actual all-in monthly cost of this property? Not the mortgage payment. Mortgage plus taxes, plus insurance, plus average maintenance. This number is almost always higher than what gets quoted in the listing. Significantly higher. The third, what is the best rate available, not the first rate offered? Bring a competing offer to the bank, any bank. The conversation changes immediately. Most buyers never have this conversation because no one suggests they should. 3 questions. They take about 20 minutes to research. They can move a transaction outcome by tens of thousands of dollars. The reason most buyers do not ask them is not ignorance. It is that no one in the room benefits from them asking. There is a difference between buying a home and having a housing strategy. A purchase is a transaction. You saw something you wanted, you went through the process, you signed. A strategy starts before you see a single property. It starts with the ratio, with the timeline, with the opportunity cost, with an honest answer to the question, am I buying because this is the right financial move, or because I'm at the age where people buy? Most people are doing a purchase while believing they are executing a strategy. The wealthy do not buy a home the way most people buy a home. They treat it like any other capital decision. What does this cost to hold? What does it cost to exit? What would the capital earn deployed differently? Does the return justify the illiquidity? Those questions feel cold. They are supposed to feel cold. Cold is what keeps the decision in your hands instead of in the hands of everyone in the room who earns something when you sign. When you buy a primary residence, you are not buying an investment. You are buying certainty. You are buying the right to paint the walls. You are buying school district stability and the absence of a landlord and the psychological experience of something being yours. Those things have value, real value, but they are lifestyle purchases, not investment purchases, and the system spent decades convincing you they were the same thing because it is very much in the system's interest that you believe that. You can want the certainty, you can want the walls, you can decide that those things matter enough to accept the financial trade-off. Just know what you are trading, know the number, run the calculation, and make the decision with your eyes open instead of with the momentum of a process designed to close you. The neighbor who paid $40,000 less than you was not smarter. They just refused to let the transaction move faster than their understanding of it. They asked the uncomfortable questions. They made the agent slightly less comfortable. They negotiated the mortgage like the bank had expected not to be negotiated with. They got a different outcome not because the market was different, but because they were different inside the transaction. That is available to anyone who knows it is available. Most people never find out it was available until after the papers are signed. That is the system working exactly as intended. And now you know,